Let's do this! How you doing, guys? Once again, it's Eric from RuleTheWasteland.com coming back with another Prepper Trifecta video where I will be doing the same topic as JJ Johnson of Reality Survival and Che of Prepper Logic. And we were doing this without knowing what the other person's going to say, as usual, and then releasing the video at the exact same time, or roughly the same time. You know, sometimes Shay's a little bit slow on the draw there. And once again, I will reign supreme with my logic and knowledge and delivery and just hair and, yeah, supremacy. Ruling the wasteland is sort of what I do. And don't let the illustrious Florida jacket fool you. Despite being a alum of this great institution with a priceless degree in political science, I am now in the true wasteland of the southern Nevada desert. So let's get started. This video is about 10 sanitation considerations for living in a post-shit-hit-the-fan environment. As usual, I will set up a very vague kind of scenario here. It's a serious shit-hit-the-fan event, you know, grid down, widespread, probably WROL, but certainly grid down, widespread, long-term shit-the-fan event. We're not talking about you're stuck in your house for a blizzard, you know, over the weekend, or power's out for a hurricane or something like that. Even though many of these will apply, what I'm talking about is a serious long-term shit-hit-the-fan event. So that's the framework for this discussion, is a serious long-term shit-the-fan event where you're living with presumably at least a few other people, if not a prepper group or a community. Most of these all will apply if you're by yourself or one other person, but they're magnified the larger the group is. So let's get right into it. Again, these are also in no specific order of importance, depending on your situation and the events that have transpired. Some of these may be more significant than the others. I'm just going to go in the order that I thought them up. The first and most obvious issue when it comes to, or consideration when it comes to waste or to sanitation, is waste disposal. Whether that's human waste, pet waste is the obvious ones, or scraps that you can't use for anything else, food scraps, trash of pretty much any kind. When it comes to something you have to dispose of, whether that's human waste, paper trash, anything, you really only have three options, which is to burn it, bury it, or biodegrade it. Some of those are some little overlap, and I'm considering flushing to be burying it. So if you're lucky enough, to be on a septic type situation, or to already have a vault or, you know, outhouse type toilet set up, that can be very easy. You just have to make sure you have the, you know, the lye or the caustic lye or sawdust or something to put on top of it so that you're not dealing with an overwhelming stench if you have a vault toilet, and the ability to do maintenance if you have a septic system that you potentially have more people, you know, that might have showed up to your property in the event of a serious fan event. The other options are burning it or biodegrading it, essentially composting it, which in the sense of a vault toilet, that's basically what you're doing. But you can do above ground composting of waste, certainly stuff like paper and food waste. Certainly human waste can be composted. It has to be done in very specific ways. I recommend a couple books if you plan on biodegrading waste, particularly human waste. That is Compost Everything by David the Good, and the Humanure Handbook specifically for composting human waste. It can certainly be done, and the compost can even be used, is provided you follow some specific guidelines, such as after you have a finished bucket or pile, it has to be left for about a year before you can actually use it for gardening or anything, just to be safe. Because with everything on this list with sanitation, the biggest concerns are going to be just smell and general cleanliness, and then obviously the disease aspect of dealing with any sort of waste, which is certainly the most significant. But the smell and the cleanliness and everything can have huge impacts on morale and things like that. So the number one would be, you need to have a plan for getting rid of waste. That's your human waste, that's your pet, your dog shit, your cat shit, that's scraps of food, either feed it to chickens, compost it, whatever. Paper waste, you're either using it as toilet paper and then composting it, you're burning it, whatever. But you have to have a plan and know that there's actually a way to do all these things. If you're burning waste, when are you doing it? Do you have a normal suburban house? If it's only like a moderate shit-the-fan event, can you have big barrels of burning human shit in the back of your yard? Probably not. So important to come up with some ideas for how to do this. It's going to depend greatly depending on your situation. If you have, you know, a 10-acre property in North Carolina woods, not going to be too big of an issue. If you're in an apartment in a major city, going to be a huge issue. So that's something to consider. I'm not going to go into all the different options because like they're just infinite depending on the various situations, but something to consider, disposing of waste. The next one is for people exclusively on sewer systems of any kind, and it's something that you don't see a lot of people talking about, but could potentially be a major issue, and that is sewage backflow of some kind. We're all used to thinking about and sort of preparing for the idea that we might not be able to use the sewage system, but what a lot of people don't consider is that when the reasons why we might not be able to use it is because the water treatment isn't being done anymore, or there could be overuse based on the levels of treatment that are happening and the processing. Could be natural flooding could affect it. If you're connected to the sewer, those pipes basically go both ways. So if there's water treatment stopping at the plant or blocked up, the fatbergs of baby wipes and stuff and tampons aren't being removed anymore, and then you have some major rains or just people still trying to flush things down the toilet, that could cause flooding in the sewer that could actually back up into your toilet and explode stuff everywhere. I still haven't come up with a really kind of realistic way to deal with this. I've thought about maybe buying some sort of plate that you could cap over, where the wax seal goes in your toilet, maybe remove the toilet and try to bolt down some sort of plate to block it off, maybe connect a pipe instead of a toilet or to your toilet pipe and just stick it out a window, something like that. If you have any ideas on that, put it in the description below this video, but it is a consideration. I'm sorry that I don't have solutions for you. Those are some ideas, but it's not something that we have to deal with very often, if ever, in a real-world situation without just calling a plumber. So some sort of valve or something that you could actually block off the ability of sewage to come back through the pipes or the water is something to consider. It's something a lot of people don't consider, but certainly could be an issue. And if you have sewage sprayed all over your house, that could be a major problem for health and sanitation. So think about what you're going to do if you have sewage overflow issues post shit hit the fan. This next consideration is slightly macabre, a little bit morbid, but it's something that could certainly happen in a major grid down. It's going to happen. It might not happen to you or your group, but it is going to happen. So you're probably going to have to encounter this problem to some degree, and that is dead bodies, whether it's your pets, your neighbors, someone in your group. At some point, you're going to come across something that has died, and you're going to have to figure out a way to deal with it. You can't just let a body sit there and rot in your immediate vicinity. At the very least, it's going to be horribly uncomfortable because of odor and because of vermin and pests and things like that. And it certainly could cause a host of health issues, leaving dead bodies lying around. And flies, all sorts of problems could develop. So it comes back to this kind of overlaps with waste disposal with a little bit different considerations because especially if you're talking about a human body, but you've got to burn it, bury it, or biodegrade it. Those are still your only options. So you probably can't throw a human body on your compost pile. Burning it makes sense, but like I said, are you in an apartment in New York City, or are you in a 10-acre plot in Montana? It's going to make a big difference. If you're out in the woods, burning is probably the best option. Make sure you keep some sort of record of someone, even if it's not someone if it's a neighbor or just a body that you find, it's probably a good idea to try and take any sort of identifying, an identification cards, or maybe take a picture if you have some sort of operating camera. And this goes back to what I talked about in my things community should do post just the fan and record keeping and maintain some sort of historical event, is if you could jot down a brief description of where you found them, when you found them, what it appears they died of, what they look like or their name. That could help someone out tremendously and getting some closure, if nothing else, years later when society has returned to normal, or even in a localized event where, it's a Katrina type situation, finding a bag, if you think it's temporary, maybe having some sort of large contractor bags, but just having a plan. That's the most important thing for all this, the things on this list, is that you will have many options for most of these, and they're going to be different depending on your situation, but you have to know what they are, and you have to be ready to enact at least some of them, which is going to take planning ahead of time. The next one, which is going to encounter some of the same issues, is the ability to quarantine. You could have someone in your group or your neighbor come down with a fairly significant sickness. Certainly could be, any of the random diseases that could crop up in a very disease-ridden post-shit-the-fan event. But it could also be something as simple as influenza, where even if you know that there's a decent chance they're going to recover even without any significant treatment, you really don't want everyone in your group to come down with a legit flu. That could be crippling. So if you have some way, even if it's just a room set aside with some basic protocols for coming in and out of the room and disinfecting and things like that, to where you can sort of separate people who are sick, that could go a long ways towards keeping your group healthy as a whole. That's going to require identifying the space ahead of time, setting it up ahead of time for it to be used that way, having different equipment like gloves and masks, maybe even eye protection or some sort of hospital gowns or something, separate water and eating containers that you can wash thoroughly, things like that. Different ways of doing it, but having ahead of time somewhere and some methods for at least partially separating someone who's seriously ill is going to be an important consideration. The next issue is the use or disposal of gray water. Now, sewage and things like that, you realize that you're just, you're burning, burying, or biodegrading sewage, even the water. You're not reusing that for any purpose. Potentially, composting or fertilizing being a slight exception depending on how it's processed, with urine and things like that. But gray water, things that after you've showered, after you've cooked and cleaned, after you've done things like that, especially in many situations, water is going to be at a very premium. We've talked before with Shay and JJ about the differences. Like he has so much water near where he's at that he hasn't had to worry about that as being a major concern. When I was back in Florida, it was also not a major concern. Reusing gray water would not be something that would even cross my mind in a situation like that, because we would get more rain in the average month in Florida probably than the entire year out here in Vegas. So, but, like I said, out here in Vegas, in the desert, lots of other places, California, and water is much more of a premium. So you can't just necessarily get rid of that gray water. And you have to have a place to store it after you've used it. Make sure that the chemicals that you're using for washing your clothes or washing your dishes or washing yourself allow that water to be reused for washing something else, washing plants, things like, or not washing plants, gardening, growing plants, maybe flushing a toilet if your sewage or your sewage, if your sewer system is still working, but just having a plan to collect it and a plan of what you're going to use it for could be important. And that way you're not wasting it and not just dumping it somewhere, because you don't necessarily want your filthy shower water to just be put anywhere either. It shouldn't necessarily be a health concern, but it could be a cleanliness concern or smell concern or things like that. And it certainly could be a waste concern as well. So having a plan and a purpose for dealing and using your gray water is something that not a lot of people have thought about, or at least not talked about. I talked a little bit about waste disposal before, specifically your actual like biological waste, but there's other types of waste too, and I'm breaking this category out a little bit on its own because I think it deserves some special attention, and that is non-edible food waste. It sort of becomes the same sort of problems that you'll get with human waste with less safety concerns. Obviously, edible food waste of any kind could be not necessarily by humans, because then it wouldn't be waste, you would just eat it. And in a survival situation, you would be eating everything that, those little gross parts of the chicken, the cartilage, and the ligament, you would be eating all that. You shouldn't have almost anything left after something like that. But there's still going to be parts of plants that are legitimately not edible, husks and seeds and stalks or leaves of some certain plants, bones, and just things like scales from a fish, certain organs, different things like that. That is going to be food waste. So it's going to have the problem of smelling, potentially causing bacteria or drawing pests, but it won't necessarily have the same dangers as actual human or carnivore waste. But you're still going to have the same options for dealing with it. So I don't necessarily recommend mixing it with the sewage waste, simply because you can process it more easily and use it more quickly than you can with waste. But you still have to have an option for burying, burning, or biodegrading. Now, burying is good if you use it as compost. Fish heads and stuff like that specifically can make really good compost. David the Good has talked about this stuff before too. Burning it is an option. I think it's a waste in most situations, but if you're in a small, particularly small area without a lot of composting or burying options, might be your only plan to be able to do that. And then biodegrading, obviously composting it, just make sure you bury it so that it's not attracting pests and things like that. And then you can pretty much treat it like normal compost unless you have a really bad pest problem in your area. The seventh, I believe, consideration for sanitation post shit the fan is washing dishes and clothing. This isn't a hard thing to do. It takes a little elbow grease. Most of us have washed at least dishes by hand at some point, if not laundry. but you have to have a method to do it ahead of time, or you're going to be caught scrambling, looking for containers, looking for utensils, looking for soap. So think about it. Think about how you're going to do it. Probably I recommend actually doing it for a day or two, because you might find things that you're missing, or your plan for doing it doesn't quite work as well as you thought, or might work better than you thought, and you can get rid of some other things. But you have to have a container to do it in, a place to do it, water to do it with if you're in a place where water is scarce. Any tools you need, like an agitator. I'll put a link in the description to some pretty cool plungers that you can use for washing clothes, for agitating it, or some sort of hand washing tumbler for dishes, different types of scrubbers, different containers in totes maybe, if you can't use your sink to drain water. Because if your sewage system isn't working, washing in your sink is not a good idea, because then you'll have to like scoop the water out. So I would much rather do it in a big plastic tote and then trying to do it in the sink if you can't use the drain. If you can use the drain, that's a good idea if you're in an area where water's plentiful and you can just flush it. If you need to maintain or salvage the gray water, then I would do it in a container as well. So containers, scrubbing utensils, the different types of soap that are hopefully non-caustic or all natural, so you can reuse the water if you need to, or at the very least dump it on your plants and things like that, or potentially use it for washing other pieces of gear and whatnot. So just think about the different things you would need. I'll put a link in the description to some of the items that I have or have used in the past. The eighth consideration is similar, but it's washing yourself. Definitely much more important, and something that you still have to have considerations for. Where is this water coming from? Do you have a bag? Do you have a bucket set up? Do you have some sort of foot pump? Are you going to have to ladle it out as you sit in something? Where is it going? Is your drain going to work? Are you in the tub? If you can't use your tub or shower, do you have another container big enough? Do you have somewhere outside where you can do it without being completely exposed to safety considerations or bad weather? How is this water getting heated? How is it getting purified? And what are you using to wash yourself in terms of products? What are you using to wash yourself in terms of utensils or tools? Scrubbers, washcloths, loofahs, whatever. All the stuff that you normally take care of in a normal shower situation, you have to be able to go down that list and check off how this is being taken care of in your preparedness plan. The ninth consideration is fairly obvious, but it bears mentioning nonetheless, and that is toiletries and actual products. You can't maintain sanitation and personal hygiene if you don't have the things that you're using all the time to do it. They can be all natural and growing certain types of plants and mint and stuff like that if you want to do that. And it can certainly be taken care of by just stockpiling more of the things that you use. But you have to think about stuff. Are you using electric toothbrush now? Are you using a bunch of water to do all these, to shave and stuff? You might need to come up with different ways for doing that. But just start writing stuff down for a couple weeks as you go through your normal hygiene process, and then make sure you have ways to take care of all those things. Cutting hair, cutting facial hair and body hair if you need to, dealing with brushing your teeth and oral hygiene, flossing, mouthwash, toothaches, whatever. Dealing with body washing, obviously, deodorant, any sort of nail clippers, what are those things called? Q-tips, anything like that. Different sorts of, not medications, but just products in general. What are you going to do, like with your glorious hair? Are you going to get products and have someone keep it tight, or are you just going to shave it off? Can you do that without power? Do you have the scissors that can actually work for cutting hair? Or do you have those crappy kindergarten scissors that'll just, things like that. So all the different types of toiletries and cleaning supplies, like I just mentioned in the last one. If you're washing stuff, what are you using? How much of it do you have? And can you use the water afterwards? Can they be used for anything else? Stuff like that. So the cleaning yourself and every other type of hygiene and self-cleanliness and sanitation, wipes, toilet paper, feminine hygiene products, all that stuff needs to be considered. My 10th one is very important, I think, often overlooked, and it's not 100% essential to survival, but it will make everything on this list a hell of a lot easier. And that is to set up some system for having water, actual movement of water, flowing water, running water, something like that. Now, I'm not talking about a whole plumbing system, but something so that you're not literally having to scoop water out of a container for every time you're using it. I remember in the Army, and you've seen these maybe at certain festivals or outdoor things, they have hand washing stations where you can fill a reservoir, and then with a foot pump, water will come out and you can wash your hands or wash things with both hands free instead of having to pour a little water on it, scrub, things like that. You could even improvise some of these by using any sort of foot pump, uh, showers in bags that you can lay out in the sun and hang up. So any sort of basically water tower type situation you can improvise. Anything as simple as a 5-gallon bucket with, you can put like a bulkhead fitting on it and then some tubing and then a valve. That's simple. Just make sure you have the buckets and the hardware to do it and some place to hang it. And that's a pretty good system. But having that ability to have water flow somewhat on demand, even in small quantities, is going to make all the things on this list a hell of a lot easier and life a hell of a lot more normal than the alternative. So I definitely recommend looking into various ways to have flowing, running, or pumped water, gravity fed, anything like that for the various washing, cleaning, and sanitation things that you're going to be doing. So that is my list of the top 10 sanitation considerations for post shit the fan living. I'm going to run through the list really quick. Like I said, no specific order. Human and pet waste disposal, sewage backflow potential problems, disposing of dead bodies, quarantining ill people, gray water use or reuse or disposal, food waste disposal, non-edible food waste, washing clothes and dishes, washing yourself, toiletries and cleaning supplies, and running water systems. So that is my list. Let me know what you think, if I left out anything major in your mind, or if there were some things that you hadn't considered. Link will be in the description. Link to JJ's and Che's channels will be there as well. Their videos should come up around the same time. Let me know what you think, and then join us a week from Super Bowl Sunday, I think is the current plan, to the live stream. I believe it's going to be on my channel this time, and we'll talk about the things that we came up with for our videos. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll talk to you later.